Welcome back. Glad to have your company this afternoon. MP and TalkTV host Nadine Dorries says she's got rid of her electric car. She says it was simply too difficult to find a charging spot above the Watford Gap. The former Cabinet Minister has now called on the government to delay its ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. And I'm joined in the studio by Lois, the director of CAR26. It's a group that campaigns against net zero targets. Hi, Lois. Nice to see you.
Hello.
And James Court, who's CEO of the Electric Vehicle Association. Hello, James. Good to see you both. Well, let's start with you, Lois. Obviously, you've read what Nadine Dorries has to say. Just précis for anybody listening or watching today why she's decided to get rid of her electric vehicle.
Well, she had difficulty outside of London charging the vehicle, and I mean, she's not alone. The sales of electric vehicles went down in June, and actually nearly 84% of all new car sales in June were petrol and diesel vehicles. So, you know, the British public are going out of their way to buy these vehicles, and you know, it's no surprise that there isn't the capacity to do this. Even just 20% more cars would mean that our grid would be overwhelmed. It would be absolutely overwhelmed.
And what is the purpose of your business, CAR26? What does it do?
What we're doing is we are highlighting and discussing and debating net zero legislation. So a lot of people think, oh, net zero, look after the environment. We're environmentalists. We're not anti-environmental things. But what we are anti is not being allowed to debate policies that have such an extraordinary effect on normal people's lives, being able to fly, family holiday once a year, being able to drive. I believe the electric car push isn't actually about electric cars at all, but about getting people off the road. And there's a House of Lords report that basically confirms that came out a few months ago.
And James Court looking rather uncomfortable sitting next to you listening to all of this.
Sorry.
James, so Nadine Dorries saying she just couldn't stand the electric vehicle any longer because it was just impossibly difficult to charge it. Just made life difficult. And the whole point of owning a vehicle, presumably, is to make life easier. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to read it. Very few people, I mean, over 90% satisfaction with people who drive their EVs. I think a lot of people perhaps don't want to or don't think about doing just a little bit more when they start their journey. For me now, I've had mine for about 18 months. If I'm going somewhere new, I usually just make sure I look on Zap Map and it takes about 30 seconds and I've got an idea of where to go. I think once people have got round that idea, and especially if you own your own driveway, it's a no-brainer for an awful lot of people. But this is just at the start of the journey, and I think we've got to remember that as well.
Can I just make one point? Only 30% of people, not houses, but people have access to off-street parking, and that figure is much lower in terms of people having their own driveway as well, you know, especially in places like London or cities. So what we're doing is we're actually saying that working class people or city dwellers, or in fact anyone that isn't rich enough and lucky enough to have their own driveway, can't drive.
I mean,
aren't we?
That's not a statistic I've heard. It's usually between 60 and 70% people have access to a driveway. It's a statistic I heard. But ignoring that,
No.
I think that's the one that's most often quoted. I think we've got to remember where we are in the journey on this. So only 2% at the moment of cars on the road are electric vehicle. Before 2020, you're talking maybe sort of a dozen models that were available. In the last 3 years, there's been an explosion in different shapes, models. That second-hand car market is only beginning to be seen, probably in the next year or 18
Apparently
months.
there is no second-hand car market, to be fair, from what I've been told from dealers. They have to knock £8,000 minimum off the guide price of a second-hand electric vehicle so that they can actually sell it. Because the battery situation.
Tell me about the battery situation.
Yeah, what battery situation? Because at the moment we're hearing that most of them are lasting a lot longer and actually currently are completely out doing that.
From talking to people in the industry, my understanding is that the battery, I'm sure it depends on how much you're willing to spend, but let's talk about a normal person buying the cheapest normal car, say 20 grand. I mean, for most people, that's completely unachievable. You are looking at between 7 and 8 years where there's a problem with the battery, and sometimes, quite often, the price of a new battery is exactly the same as buying a new car. And to be honest, most people buy second-hand cars. You know, it's very A lucky number of people are able to buy a brand new car. Again, we're pricing working class people and middle class people off the road.
I will tell you about I will just tell you about a conversation I had very recently as I was riding along in the back of a black cab, one of London's, famous and traditional and much loved black cabs. And that cab driver was talking about electric black cabs. And he said it's kind of assumed somehow that all black cab drivers live in a semi-detached house in Ilford and they've all got a front drive, but they haven't. Lots of them live in flats, lots of them live in council housing, actually, council flats, and they can't charge an electric black cab, and they're in real trouble because there's tremendous pressure on them to purchase and drive such a vehicle. It's making their lives incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And, so many black cab drivers went out of business during the pandemic. It's a massively depleted force now of drivers. I mean, it's not that I'm the professional spokesperson on behalf of black cabbies, but that's what I was told only the other day, and I've been told it before by cab drivers. Do you think that's fair, that they say it's very, very difficult to say they must drive electric cabs?
See, I had exactly the opposite sort of experience, and I, again, charge on public charges. I don't have a driveway, and I speak to black cabs more than I probably speak to a lot of other people, and those, especially in the last 6 months, have said they are saving money hand over fist because of the cheaper electricity you can get.
I've never, ever heard that. I just want to add that in. I've never, ever been told that by any black cab driver.
The people that, when I'm charging next to people,
but you're charging next to them, so
well,
do you say that you work what the name of your organisation is when you're chatting to them?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, that's probably why they're saying what you want to hear. Then.
Is it true that sales of electric vehicles are down last month?
By a percentage point. I mean, they're roughly around 17 or 18%. Supply chains can fluctuate, and that's the thing. I mean, we also saw them go up to sort of 28% in December last year. A lot of it depends on the supply chain.
And what is the story with the price, the cost of purchasing an electric car?
So they can be, at the moment, anywhere between 15 and 30% more, but they are cheaper to drive and cheaper to run. The cars are only getting cheaper, and I think that's the thing. And we're seeing a lot of cars now coming in, especially from China, which are going to come in at a staggeringly low price. And I think this is the flexibility and where we're going to go to. I'm more excited, actually, about the market in 7 or 8 years' time, where more people can actually start.
So when British cars are not being produced, we're buying all our cars from China, who incidentally have the lion's share of all the rare minerals that are required to make these cars, which are mined, let's be honest, using child slaves in the Congo. How is that woke? How is that green?
I couldn't agree with you more. I would want there to be a thriving UK car industry. The problem is, at the moment, we're not doing enough. And I've got real fears that the way that the government's continuing to go, and the way that even some within the car industry are going, we are not going to be able to sell, even if we wanted to, our petrol and diesel cars to any significant market post-2035. If the UK doesn't start right now building gigafactories and trying to train up the skills, we're not going to have a car manufacturing. And that's just not somewhere...
Let me ask you about something else. We've talked on this programme already today about ULEZ and whether it's a cash cow and whether, if you're allowed to pay £12.50 and drive your diesel car and pollute the air up, it means that really nobody cares at all about air quality. All they really care about is making money. But I wonder about the future when it comes to driving electric cars, which at the moment, if you live in a city, exempt you from paying congestion charge. How long feasibly do you think drivers of electric vehicles will be exempt from paying congestion charges? How long is that going to last? Because very quickly, isn't that going to be a cash cow? Isn't that going to be an untapped source of income?
It's one of the reasons I'm very sceptical about some of the ULEZ moves and some of the moves happening from the Mayor of London. So in London, we're actually going to take away the congestion charge exemption from electric vehicles in 2025, when other countries are actually trying to promote, through some of these softer mechanisms, we seem to be ripping them away. We've taken away the grants, we've taken away the grants for wall charges, and now we're taking away some of those softer benefits which people bought. I mean, if you want it to look like it's not a cash cow, you've got to start doing things to actually promote these things. And we're not doing that as quickly as we should.
Why not?
I mean, the London Mayor can answer that, why he's taken away the congestion charge. I don't see the reason for it if it's there for air pollution. Why the government aren't doing things. They are doing certain things very well, but I think this feeds into a wider aspect that we haven't really grasped, things like the Inflation Reduction Act in America, which are throwing trillions of pounds towards this technology. And I've got a real worry that the UK, which had the Nissan Leaf up in Sunderland, we've had the advantage of this, and we are giving it away yet again. And we are going to get left behind, because America are putting huge amounts of money into this, China are putting huge amounts of money. I mean,
I
they've spent
believe
hundreds of
there's
trillions.
we shouldn't be doing any of it. If it can't stand on its own 2 feet, in a free market, things should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Electric cars, the reason they need all these perks and subsidies is because nobody wants them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with petrol cars in particular. And actually, a modern, up-to-date petrol vehicle has less CO2 in terms of its lifespan. There was a report done by Howard Cox recently than an electric vehicle. So actually, if you get a proper modern petrol car, there's less, whatever you may think about CO2 and man-made global warming, it's actually less CO2 impact from a petrol vehicle than an EV.
All right, I'll give James a chance to reply, and then that's the end of this discussion.
There are a few stats that I think are a bit wonky that are coming out here. I don't think any independent person has looked at that. I think the savings are nearly up to a third of what a car is, a petrol car is. These things aren't perfect. There is no perfect way to drive around. They are better, they're fun to drive, and they are cheaper. And I think the important thing is, even by 2030, we are not banning petrol or diesel by 2030. We're banning new car sales. People will still be driving petrol and diesel cars up until 2045. And I'm excited that when these electric cars start getting into their third, fourth hand markets, and that's when we can really see the benefits of people who need to save money.
Thank you both very much indeed for coming in. Greatly appreciated. Coming up after the break. Forget dry January. Apparently it's dry June after Brits have been drinking record amounts of alcohol-free beer this summer. I'm Vanessa Feltz. You're with Talk on TV, radio and online. Thank you very much.